The Terran Alliance Station Harmony was the largest space station in the neutral zone. It floated in the dark between three star systems, a place where different species came to talk, trade, and sometimes argue. Over 3,000 beings lived and worked there. They came from dozens of worlds. Some breathed oxygen. Some breathed methane. Some did not breathe at all. Marcus Cole had worked in the station cafeteria for 11 years. For the last 6, he had been the head chef. He was a big man with thick arms, gray hair cut short, and hands that had been burned, cut, and healed more times than he could count. He ran his kitchen the way a captain runs a ship. Everything had its place. Everyone had their job. Meals went out on time, every time. The cafeteria served breakfast, lunch, and dinner to hundreds of beings each day. Marcus had learned to cook for species he had never heard of before coming to the station. He knew that Glorvians could not eat anything red. He knew that Tellarites preferred their food slightly burned. He knew that the methane breathers in their sealed suits liked to watch others eat, even though they absorbed nutrients through their skin. His kitchen staff was a mix of humans and aliens. His sous chef was a Tellarite named Grum, a short creature covered in rough brown fur with a flat nose and small eyes. Grum complained about everything, but he was the best sauce maker Marcus had ever seen. There were also 2 human line cooks, a Glorvian pastry specialist, and a cleaning crew of small insect-like beings called the Tiki, who could scrub a pot perfectly clean in 30 seconds. On this particular morning, Marcus arrived at the kitchen at 500 hours, station time. He checked the inventory, reviewed the day's menu, and made sure the breakfast crew was ready. Everything was normal, everything was calm. Then his communication device buzzed. The message was from Ambassador Linda Vance, the senior human diplomat on the station. Marcus knew her well. She often came to the cafeteria late at night when negotiations were difficult. She would sit in the corner, drink coffee, and stare at the stars through the big windows. Marcus would sometimes bring her a slice of pie without her asking. The message said, "Marcus, I need your help. Come to conference room 7. Urgent." Marcus frowned. He did not like leaving his kitchen during the breakfast rush, but Linda did not use the word urgent unless she meant it. He told Grum to take over and walked quickly through the station corridors. Conference room 7 was in the diplomatic section, a quieter part of the station with thick carpets and soft lighting. Marcus felt out of place there in his white chef coat and comfortable shoes, but he kept walking until he reached the right door. Linda was waiting outside. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back tight and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Today, those eyes looked worried. "Thank you for coming," she said. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Marcus asked. Linda took a deep breath. "Do you know the Kethrani?" Marcus nodded. He had read about them. The Kethrani were predators from a high-gravity world. They stood about 7 feet tall, covered in smooth black fur, with claws that could cut through metal and eyes that glowed amber in low light. They looked like something from a human nightmare. But they were also known for being honorable and intelligent. The Terran Alliance had been trying to form a partnership with them for years. Senior diplomat Vorak arrived this morning for the trade negotiations, Linda explained. But there was a problem. His mate had an emergency clan meeting on their homeworld. She had to leave immediately. "And?" Marcus said. Linda pointed at the conference room door. "And she left him with their 3 cubs." Marcus blinked. "Cubs?" "Children," Linda said. "Young ones. The Kethrani do not allow non-family members to care for their offspring. It would be a great insult. So Vorak had to bring them with him." She opened the door, and Marcus looked inside. Vorak stood near the window. He was exactly as tall and fearsome as the reports described. His black fur absorbed the light. His amber eyes glowed softly. His claws were retracted, but Marcus could see the slits in his fingertips where they would emerge. But Marcus barely noticed the adult Kethrani. His attention was fixed on the 3 small shapes hiding behind Vorak's legs. The cubs were miniature versions of their father, though their fur was softer and fluffier. The largest one stood about 3 feet tall. The smallest barely reached Marcus's knee. They had the same amber eyes, the same retractable claws, the same forward-facing gaze that marked them as predators. They were also clearly terrified. The smallest one peeked out from behind Vorek's leg, saw Marcus looking, and ducked back with a tiny chirping sound. "Chef Cole," Vorok said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "I apologize for this irregular situation. My cubs have not eaten since we left our ship. The food supplies I brought were damaged during docking." Marcus understood immediately why Linda had called him. The cubs needed to be fed. And feeding young predators from another species was not something just anyone could do. "What are their names?" Marcus asked. He had learned long ago that this was always the first question to ask about children. Vorok's eyes widened slightly. Perhaps he had not expected a human to ask. "The eldest is Ricketh. He has seen 8 cycles. The middle one is Sora. She has seen 6 cycles. And the smallest is Ven. He has seen only 4 cycles." Marcus crouched down slowly, making himself smaller and less threatening. He had raised 4 children of his own. He knew that getting low was the first step to earning trust. "Hello, Ricketh," he said calmly. "Hello, Sora. Hello, Ven." 3 pairs of amber eyes stared at him from behind their father's legs. "I am Marcus," he continued. "I am the chef. I make food. Are you hungry?" There was a long pause. Then Ven, the smallest one, peeked out again. His nose twitched. His ears, small and pointed, rotated toward Marcus. "Hungry," Ven repeated in a tiny voice. His pronunciation was not perfect, but the word was clear. Marcus smiled. "Then let us go to my kitchen. I will make you something good." He stood up and looked at Vorok. "With your permission, senior diplomat." Vorok stared at Marcus for a long moment. The Kathrani were not easy to read, but Marcus thought he saw something like surprise in those glowing eyes, perhaps even gratitude. "You would feed my cubs yourself?" Vorok asked. "I have fed diplomats from 47 species," Marcus said. "I have cooked for soldiers, scientists, and royalty. I have prepared meals during emergencies, celebrations, and one time during an actual hull breach." He shrugged. "3 children? I think I can manage." Linda made a small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a groan. Vorok's mouth opened slightly, showing teeth that were very sharp and very white. Marcus had read that this was the Kathrani version of a smile. "Very well, Chef Cole," Vorok said. "I must attend the opening session of the negotiations. My aid is unavailable. I have no choice but to trust you with my cubs." He crouched down and spoke to his children in their own language. The sounds were all clicks and growls, impossible for human tongues to copy. The cubs listened carefully. Ricketh nodded solemnly. Sora looked uncertain. Ven was still staring at Marcus with wide, curious eyes. Vorok stood and looked at Marcus one more time. "They are my heart," he said quietly. "All 3 of them." "I understand," Marcus said, and he meant it. Linda stepped forward. "I am assigning Danny Park to help. He is a junior aide, but he is good with children." A young man appeared in the doorway. He was perhaps 25, with neat black hair and a diplomatic uniform that still looked new. His face was pale, and his eyes kept flicking to the cubs with obvious nervousness. "Danny," Linda said, "you will accompany Chef Cole and the Kathrani children. Help him with anything he needs." "Yes, Ambassador," Danny said. His voice cracked slightly on the second word. Marcus looked at the young man, then at the 3 small predators, then back at Danny. He sighed internally. This was going to be interesting. "Come on then," Marcus said to the cubs. "The kitchen is this way." He started walking. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he heard the soft padding of small feet behind him. He glanced back and saw Ricketh leading his siblings, all 3 of them following Marcus at a careful distance. Danny hurried to catch up, walking beside Marcus and whispering, "Sir, I have never worked with Kathrani before. What do I do?" "First," Marcus said, "stop whispering. They can hear you perfectly. Their ears are better than ours." Danny's face went even paler. "Second," Marcus continued, "just stay calm. Children are children, no matter what species they are. They want to feel safe. They want to feel interested. And right now, they want to eat." They walked through the corridors toward the cafeteria. Station personnel stopped and stared as they passed. Three small Catherine cubs padding through the hallways was not something anyone had seen before. Marcus ignored the stares. He had work to do. The cafeteria was busy with the breakfast crowd when they arrived. Marcus led the group through a side door into the kitchen, bypassing the main dining area. He did not want to overwhelm the cubs with too many strangers at once. Grum looked up from his station and froze. "What?" he said slowly. "Are those?" "These are Ricketh, Sora, and Ven," Marcus said. "They are our guests. They need to be fed." Grum stared at the cubs. The cubs stared back. Ven growled softly, a sound like a small engine. "They are predators," Grum said. "Small predators, in my kitchen." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "This will end badly," Grum predicted. Marcus was starting to suspect he might be right, but he was not going to admit that. "Get me the Catherine dietary file," he told Grum, "and clear table 6 in the quiet corner. I want privacy screens up, and someone find me some cushions, small ones." The kitchen staff moved into action. Marcus looked down at the three cubs, who were now sniffing the air with obvious interest. The kitchen smelled of 100 different foods, a symphony of scents that must have been overwhelming to their sensitive noses. "All right," Marcus said quietly. "Let us see what kind of trouble we can avoid." But as he watched Ven's amber eyes track a server, carrying a tray of pastries across the kitchen, he had the feeling that avoiding trouble was not going to be an option. The morning had just begun. Marcus had prepared meals for difficult guests before. He had once fed a delegation of gas beings who could only consume food that had been converted to vapor. He had catered a wedding between two species that considered each other's traditional foods to be poison. He had even managed to satisfy a food critic from Earth who had given every other station restaurant a 1-star rating. But he had never tried to feed 3 hungry predator cubs in a busy kitchen. The Catherine dietary file was complicated. Their species required raw protein served at exact body temperature, which was slightly higher than human normal. The meat needed specific mineral supplements from their homeworld. It could not be processed or preserved in certain ways, and it absolutely could not be cooked. Marcus had the right supplies. He always kept stock for every species that visited the station, but preparing the meal while also watching 3 increasingly restless cubs was proving difficult. Danny stood near the cubs, looking like he might faint at any moment. The young diplomatic aide had positioned himself between the cubs and the rest of the kitchen, his arms spread slightly as if he could somehow contain them. "Sir," Danny whispered, forgetting Marcus's earlier warning about whispering, "I think they are getting bored." Marcus looked over. Ricketh, the eldest cub, was sitting calmly on a cushion, his amber eyes watching everything with patient interest. He was clearly the responsible one, trying to set a good example for his siblings. Sora, the middle cub, was less calm. She had discovered the chrome surface of a refrigerator door and was staring at her own reflection with fascination. Her ears kept flicking back and forth. Her tail, which was short and fluffy, twitched behind her. Ven was the problem. The smallest cub had abandoned his cushion entirely. He was now crouched on the floor, his entire body tense, his eyes fixed on something across the kitchen. Marcus followed his gaze. One of the tiki cleaning crew was scrubbing a pot in the corner. The small insect-like being was about the size of a cat, with 6 legs and a shiny blue shell. It moved quickly, making small clicking sounds as it worked. To a young predator, it probably looked exactly like prey. "Ven," Marcus said calmly. "No." The cub did not even look at him. His hindquarters wiggled slightly, preparing to pounce. Marcus moved fast. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and scooped Ven up before the cub could launch himself at the terrified Tiki. Ven made a sound of protest, a high-pitched yowl that made every head in the kitchen turn. "No hunting in my kitchen," Marcus said firmly. He held the cub at arm's length, looking directly into those glowing amber eyes. "The Tiki are friends. We do not eat friends." Ven stared at him. For a moment, those eyes held something wild and ancient, the instincts of a predator species going back millions of years. Then the moment passed. Ven's ears drooped. He looked almost embarrassed. "Not prey?" Ven asked in his small voice. "Not prey," Marcus confirmed. "Staff." He set Ven back down on his cushion and returned to the meal preparation. His heart was beating faster than he wanted to admit. Those little claws had been very close to his face. The tiki had frozen in place during the incident. Now it resumed cleaning, though it stayed on the far side of the kitchen, as far from the cubs as possible. Marcus finished preparing the meal. Cubes of raw protein, perfectly temperature-controlled, with the correct mineral dusting. He arranged them on 3 plates, making sure each portion was equal. Young siblings always noticed if one got more than another. He carried the plates to the table where Danny had somehow convinced the cubs to sit. Sora had left the refrigerator. Ven was back on his cushion, though he kept sneaking glances at the corner where the tiki had been. Ricketh sat straight and proper, trying very hard to be dignified. "Breakfast," Marcus announced. He placed a plate in front of each cub. The cubs sniffed their food. Their ears rotated. Their whiskers twitched. Marcus held his breath, wondering if he had gotten something wrong. Then Ven grabbed a protein cube with both paws and shoved it into his mouth. He made a sound of pure happiness, a purring growl that Marcus could feel vibrating through the floor. Sora began eating with more delicacy, picking up 1 cube at a time and chewing carefully. Ricketh gave Marcus a solemn nod of approval before beginning his own meal. Marcus let out the breath he had been holding. The food was acceptable. For about 4 minutes, everything was peaceful. The cubs ate. Danny began to relax. Marcus started thinking about the lunch preparations he still needed to supervise. Then Ven finished his plate. The smallest cub looked at his empty dish. He looked at his siblings, who were still eating. He looked around the kitchen, his amber eyes searching for something else interesting. His gaze landed on the dessert station. Marcus saw it happen. He saw the cub's focus sharpen. He saw the small body tense. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, to prevent what was about to occur. He was too late. Ven moved faster than any creature that small had any right to move. One moment he was on his cushion. The next moment he was halfway across the kitchen, a black blur of fur and claws and pure chaotic energy. He hit the dessert station like a small furry missile. Cakes fell, pastries scattered. A tower of carefully arranged fruit collapsed in slow motion, sending apples and oranges rolling across the floor. "Oh no," Danny said weakly. Ricketh stood up from his cushion. For a moment, Marcus thought the eldest cub was going to help. Instead, Ricketh spotted the ice cream machine behind the dessert station. His ears perked forward. His tail began to wag. "Ricketh, do not," Marcus began. Ricketh ran for the ice cream machine. Sora was left alone at the table. She looked at her brothers causing destruction across the kitchen. She looked at her remaining food. She looked at the salad bar, where colorful vegetables were arranged in neat rows. Her eyes locked onto the cherry tomatoes. They were small. They were round. They were red. They looked like they might run if she chased them. Sora launched herself at the salad bar. What happened next would later be described in official reports as a multi-species incident involving unauthorized food acquisition. Marcus would always feel that description was too gentle. Ven had climbed to the top of the dessert display and was batting at hanging decorations like a cat with a toy. Pastry cream was smeared across his fur. He was purring loudly. Ricketh had figured out how to operate the ice cream machine. Soft-serve vanilla was pouring onto the floor in an endless white river. The cub was trying to catch it in his mouth, tail wagging furiously. Sora had knocked over the entire salad bar. Cherry tomatoes were rolling in every direction, and she was chasing them with deadly focus, pouncing on each one with the precision of a trained hunter. Her claws left small scratches on the deck, plating with every leap. The kitchen staff had scattered. The tiki cleaning crew had retreated into the ventilation system. Grum was standing on a counter, shouting in Tellarite, which Marcus could not understand but assumed was profanity. 3 Glorvian diplomats who had been eating breakfast in the cafeteria heard the noise and came to investigate. They took one look at Sora, chasing a tomato directly toward them, and screamed. All three of them climbed onto a table, their blue skin turning pale with terror. A methane breather in an environmental suit stood by the door, watching the chaos. His translator was making strange sounds. After a moment, Marcus realized the being was laughing so hard that the device could not keep up. Danny stood in the middle of it all, frozen in place. He was holding a single protein cube that had somehow ended up in his hand. His face was the color of chalk. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Marcus looked at his kitchen. His beautiful, organized, efficient kitchen. Pastry cream on the ceiling, ice cream on the floor, tomato juice splattered on the walls, 3 predator cubs causing more damage than a hull breach. He thought about the day he had decided to become a chef. He thought about all the years of training, all the difficult meals, all the impossible situations he had survived. None of them had prepared him for this. Sora raced past him, a cherry tomato in her jaws, triumph in her eyes. Ven dropped from the dessert display, landed on a cake, and bounced off toward the beverage station. Ricketh had given up on the ice cream machine and was now investigating the walk-in freezer. If he got in there, Marcus would be finding frozen paw prints for weeks. Something inside Marcus shifted. He had handled feeding diplomats from 47 species. He had cooked during hull breaches and emergency evacuations. He had managed kitchens on 3 different stations before this one. He was not going to be defeated by 3 small children. "Enough," he said. His voice was not loud. He did not shout. But the word carried through the kitchen with the force of absolute authority. The cubs stopped. Ven paused mid-leap, landing awkwardly on a counter. Sora froze with a tomato still in her mouth. Ricketh turned from the freezer door, his paw on the handle. All 3 of them looked at Marcus. He stood in the center of his ruined kitchen, covered in various food substances, his chef's coat stained beyond saving, but his posture was straight. His expression was calm. His eyes met theirs without fear. "We are going to fix this," he said quietly. "All of us, together." The cubs stared at him. No one moved. Then Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of synthetic meat. Emergency rations. He always carried some. You never knew when you might need to bribe someone. Ven's nose twitched. His ears perked forward. Marcus held out the treat. "Come here, little one." For a long moment, nothing happened. The kitchen was silent except for the sound of ice cream still flowing from the forgotten machine and the methane breather still laughing by the door. Then Ven dropped from the counter and walked slowly toward Marcus. His movements were cautious, his body low to the ground. But his eyes never left the treat in Marcus's hand. When he reached Marcus, the big human crouched down and offered the meat. Ven took it carefully, his small teeth closing around it with surprising gentleness. He chewed, swallowed, and looked up at Marcus with something like respect. Sora approached next, the tomato falling forgotten from her mouth. Then Ricketh, abandoning the freezer and padding over to join his siblings. Within a minute, all 3 cubs were sitting at Marcus's feet, looking up at him with those glowing amber eyes. Danny made a sound that was somewhere between relief and disbelief. "How did you do that?" Marcus did not answer immediately. He was studying the cubs, seeing past the chaos they had caused to the creatures underneath. They were children. Predator children, yes, but still children. They were in a strange place, surrounded by strange smells and strange people. Their father was busy. Their mother was far away. They were bored. They were curious. They were acting on instincts that had evolved over millions of years. They needed structure. They needed engagement. They needed someone to show them the rules. Marcus looked at his destroyed kitchen. He looked at Grum still standing on the counter. He looked at the Glorvian diplomats still huddled on their table. Then he looked back at the cubs and made a decision that his supervisors would question for a very long time. "Would you like to see how a kitchen really works?" he asked. 3 small heads tilted. 3 pairs of ears rotated forward. "Yes," Ven said. "Please." Marcus smiled. It was not a gentle smile. It was the smile of a man who had just accepted a challenge. "Then follow me," he said. "We have a lot to clean up. And then we have a lot to learn." He stood and walked toward the storage closet where the cleaning supplies were kept. Behind him, he heard the soft padding of small feet following. Grum finally climbed down from the counter. "This is a terrible idea," he announced. "Probably," Marcus agreed. "They will destroy everything." "They might?" "You are insane." Marcus handed the Tellarite a mop. "Yes, now help me clean up. We have work to do." The cleanup took 2 hours, but by the end of it, 3 small Catherine cubs knew how to wipe a counter, stack dishes, and sort recycling. It was a start. The first day was chaos. The second day was slightly less chaos. By the third day, Marcus had established a routine. The cubs arrived at the kitchen each morning after their father left for negotiations. They wore small aprons that Marcus had ordered from the station fabrication unit. The aprons were bright red with white trim, sized perfectly for young Kathrani bodies. Ven had insisted on wearing his backward the first day. Marcus had allowed it. Choose your battles. Each cub had a specific job. Ricketh was in charge of quality control. His palate was excellent, his sense of smell even better. He could taste a sauce and immediately identify which ingredient was too strong or too weak. Marcus had never seen anything like it. The cub was 8 cycles old and already had a better sense of flavor than most adult chefs Marcus had trained. Sora had been given the task of presentation. At first, Marcus had been skeptical. The same cub who had destroyed the salad bar and hunted cherry tomatoes across the kitchen did not seem like an obvious choice for artistic work, but Sora had surprised him. Her predator focus, once directed at arranging food on plates rather than chasing it, produced stunning results. She could make a simple meal look like artwork. She understood color and shape in ways that seemed almost instinctive. Ven was the difficult one. The smallest cub had too much energy for any single task. He could not stay still. He could not focus for more than a few minutes. His predator instincts kept firing at every movement, every sound, every interesting smell. Marcus had tried several jobs. Stirring pots ended with sauce on the ceiling. Sorting ingredients ended with ingredients scattered everywhere. Folding napkins ended with shredded fabric and a very proud cub holding the pieces like hunting trophies. Then, Marcus discovered that Ven's sensitive nose could detect spoilage before any scanner. The smallest cub could sniff a container of food and immediately identify if something had gone bad, even if the decay was invisible and odorless to humans and most other species. Ven became the food safety inspector. He took the job very seriously. He would walk through the storage areas, nose twitching, and point at any container that did not pass his standards. His success rate was 100%. 3 times in the first week, he identified spoiled ingredients that would have otherwise been used. Grum, who had predicted disaster at every opportunity, was forced to admit that the cub was useful. He still complained constantly, but his complaints had shifted from, "These creatures will destroy everything," to, "These creatures are very annoying but also somewhat competent." For a Tellarite, this was high praise. The kitchen staff adjusted. The tiki cleaning crew learned to stay away from Ven, who still looked at them with a little too much interest. The Glorvian pastry specialist discovered that Sora loved learning about decorative techniques and began teaching her during quiet moments. Even Danny, the young diplomatic aide who had been assigned to help, started to relax. Danny spent most of his time in the kitchen now. His official job was to supervise the cubs for the diplomatic corps, but in practice he had become another member of Marcus's team. He was not a natural cook, but he was good at organization and scheduling. He kept track of the cubs' meals, their rest times, and their activities. He had also become surprisingly good at predicting when Ven was about to cause trouble. There was a specific way the small cub's tail would twitch, a certain angle of his ears that meant mischief was incoming. Danny had learned to recognize the signs and intervene before disaster struck. "You're getting good at this," Marcus told him one afternoon. Danny shrugged. "I grew up with 4 younger brothers. Cubs are not so different." Marcus laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in the kitchen since the cubs arrived. Ambassador Linda Vance came to observe on the 5th day. She stood in the doorway, watching the organized chaos of lunch service. Ricketh was tasting a soup and conferring seriously with Grum about the seasoning. Sora was arranging plates with careful precision. Ven was conducting his inspection rounds, nose twitching, ears alert. "This is not what I expected," Linda said. Marcus was chopping vegetables. His knife moved in quick, precise motions. What did you expect? Honestly, I expected you to ask for help within the first hour. I had a whole contingency plan ready. She paused. I also expected more injuries. There have been some scratches, Marcus admitted. Ven's claws come out when he gets excited, but nothing serious. Linda watched Sora present a finished plate to one of the servers. The cub stood on her hind legs, tail balanced for stability, and held out the dish with obvious pride. The server, a middle-aged human woman, accepted it with equal seriousness. Thank you, Sora, the server said. Beautiful work. Sora's ears perked forward. Her tail wagged once. Just a small movement before she controlled herself and returned to her station. She likes praise, Linda observed. They all do, Marcus said. Just like any children. They want to feel useful. They want to know they matter. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Vorak has been asking about them. He was worried at first. I think he expected complaints, demands that the cubs be confined to quarters. Instead, I have been telling him that his children are learning to cook. They are learning more than that, Marcus said. They are learning how to work with other species, how to control their instincts, how to be part of something larger than themselves. He set down his knife and turned to face the ambassador. The Kithrani are predators. Everyone knows that. Everyone is afraid of that. But being a predator does not mean being a monster. It means having certain instincts, certain drives. Those instincts can be channeled. They can be useful. He pointed at Ricketh, who was now teaching Grum a Kethrani technique for evaluating meat freshness. That cub will be an excellent diplomat someday. He is patient, he is observant, and he knows when to wait and when to act. He pointed at Sora, who was explaining her plating philosophy to the Glorvian pastry specialist. That one will be an artist. She sees patterns that others miss. She understands beauty in ways that transcend species. He pointed at Ven, who was sniffing a container with intense concentration. And that one will be something special. I do not know what yet. But his energy, his curiosity, his determination, they will take him somewhere important. Linda stared at him. You have known these children for 5 days. I have been cooking for 40 years, Marcus replied. You learn to read people quickly. Species does not change the basics. Children are children. They show you who they are going to be, if you pay attention. That evening, Vorak came to the kitchen. He arrived after the dinner rush, when the kitchen was quiet and the cleaning crew was finishing their work. The cubs had been fed and were resting in a corner, curled together in a pile of warm fur and soft breathing. Vorak stood in the doorway, his massive form blocking the light from the corridor. His amber eyes surveyed the kitchen, the clean surfaces, the organized stations, the peaceful cubs. Then he looked at Marcus. Chef Cole, he said. I owe you a debt. Marcus was scrubbing a pot. He did not stop working. You owe me nothing. I have enjoyed having the cubs here. Vorak stepped into the kitchen. His claws clicked softly on the deck plating. In Kethrani culture, caring for another's children is a sacred responsibility. It is not given lightly, and it is not accepted without creating a bond. Marcus set down the pot and dried his hands. He turned to face the Kethrani diplomat. What kind of bond? A bond of family, Vorak said. Not blood family, chosen family. In our language, the word is Kethral. It means those who guard our young. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the cubs, sleeping peacefully in their pile. He thought about the past 5 days, the chaos, the challenges, the small moments of connection. He thought about Ven's proud face when he found spoiled food, Sora's delight when her plating was praised, Ricketh's serious discussions about flavor profiles. I am honored, he said finally, but I do not know what that means. What responsibilities it brings. What expectations? Vorak's mouth opened in that sharp-toothed smile. It means that my cubs consider you pack. It means that you are welcome in my home, on my world, among my clan. It means that if you ever need help, you need only ask. He paused, and his voice softened. It also means that my cubs will want to keep visiting your kitchen. They have talked of nothing else all week. Ven has been practicing the word inspector in his sleep. Marcus laughed. He could not help it. The image of tiny Ven mumbling inspector in his dreams was too perfect. They are welcome any time, he said. Truly. Vorak nodded. He walked to his sleeping cubs and gently lifted Ven, who made a small sound of protest but did not wake. Rikith and Sora stirred, then climbed to their feet and followed their father obediently. At the doorway, Vorak paused. Chef Cole, there is one more thing. Yes? The negotiations are going well, better than expected. The trade agreement will be signed by the end of the week. Vorak's amber eyes glowed softly. I believe this is partly because of you. The other diplomats have seen how you treat my children. They have seen that humans are capable of respect, of patience, of care. It has changed their perceptions. Marcus did not know what to say. He had just been doing his job, feeding people, making sure the kitchen ran smoothly, taking care of some lost cubs who needed help. I am just a cook, he said finally. Vorak shook his head. You are more than that. You are a bridge, and my people will remember. He left, carrying Ven and followed by the other cubs. The kitchen door closed behind them. Marcus stood alone in his kitchen. The silence felt strange after days of small feet padding across the floor, small voices asking questions, small claws occasionally scratching things they should not scratch. Grum emerged from the back storage area. He had been pretending to organize supplies while actually eavesdropping, which was very Tellarite of him. Kethral, Grum said. That is a significant honor. The Kethrani do not give it lightly. How do you know about Kethrani customs? I have worked on this station for 9 years. I know about many things. Grum's flat nose twitched. I also know that you are thinking about expanding the children's program. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I did not say that. You did not need to say it. I saw your face when you watched the cubs working. You saw something. A possibility. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. There are 12 species represented on this station who have children. We have been feeding them the same way we feed adults, just in smaller portions. What if we did something different? What if we created meals designed specifically for young beings? Interactive, engaging, suited to their needs and instincts? Grum considered this. It would be complicated. Different species have different needs, different instincts, different ideas about what is appropriate for children. But it could work. It could work, Grum admitted. It would be very difficult, very complicated, very annoying. So you will help? Grum sighed heavily. It was a very Tellarite sigh, full of theatrical suffering. I suppose I must. Someone has to keep you from doing anything too stupid. Marcus grinned. Thank you, Grum. Do not thank me. I am already regretting this decision. But as Grum turned back to the storage area, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that might have been a smile on that flat, furry face. The plan was beginning to form. A menu designed for children of all species. A program to teach young beings about food, about cooperation, about working together. It was a small idea. But Marcus had learned that small ideas could grow into something much larger. All it took was someone willing to start. 3 weeks after the Kethrani cubs first invaded his kitchen, Marcus Cole officially launched the Tiny Menace menu. The name was Danny's idea. The young diplomatic aide had been watching Ven chase a protein ball across the kitchen floor when he muttered, Tiny Menace, under his breath. Marcus had overheard and laughed. The name stuck. The menu was designed to serve children from any species. Each item had multiple variations, adjusted for different dietary requirements, different instincts, and different ideas of fun. For predator species like the Kethrani, there were protein spheres that could roll and bounce. The child had to chase them down before eating. This satisfied the hunting instinct while keeping the prey safely edible and the chase safely contained. For puzzle-solving species like the Glorvians, there were treat boxes with simple locks and mechanisms. The child had to figure out how to open the container to reach the food inside. The boxes came in different difficulty levels, from very easy for the youngest children to quite challenging for older ones. For species that valued patience, like the slow-moving colonians, there were color-changing drinks that shifted hue over time. Waiting produced better colors, teaching young ones the value of not rushing. For social species, there were sharing plates designed to require cooperation. 2 or 3 children working together could open containers that one child alone could not. Marcus and his team had spent weeks developing each item. Ricketh had been invaluable in testing the predator options, making sure the chase was satisfying without being frustrating. Sora had helped design the presentation, ensuring that each item looked appealing to young eyes of various species. Ven had inspected everything multiple times, making sure nothing was spoiled and nothing was dangerous. The first official day of the tiny Menace menu arrived on a quiet Tuesday. Marcus had not advertised heavily. He wanted to start small, work out any problems, and expand slowly. But word had spread. The Glorvian ambassador arrived first, holding hands with her 2 young children. The children were small blue beings with large eyes and delicate fingers, perfect for manipulating puzzle boxes. They stared at the special children's section of the cafeteria that Marcus had set up. A lower counter, smaller chairs, brighter colors. "Chef Cole," the ambassador said, "I heard about your new program from diplomat Vorak. I must confess, after the tomato incident, I was hesitant, but my children have been asking to visit." Marcus crouched down to greet the young Glorvians. "Hello, my name is Marcus. Would you like to try something fun?" The children nodded shyly. He brought them puzzle boxes, medium difficulty, appropriate for their apparent age. The boxes were transparent, so the children could see the treats inside. The locks were mechanical, requiring specific sequences of button presses to open. The Glorvian children sat at the small table and began working on their puzzles. Their small fingers moved with increasing confidence. After a few minutes, the first box clicked open. The child who had solved it let out a sound of pure joy and reached for the treat inside. The ambassador watched with wide eyes. "They are learning problem-solving skills." "They are playing," Marcus corrected gently. "The learning happens without them noticing." More families arrived throughout the morning. A Colonian trader brought his larva, a slow-moving creature that could take 10 minutes to cross a room. Marcus gave the young one a color-changing drink and settled it in a comfortable spot to watch the show. The larva's parent sat nearby, looking more relaxed than Marcus had ever seen a Colonian look. A pair of methane breathers in environmental suits arrived with their offspring, a smaller version of themselves floating in a personal bubble. Marcus had prepared vapor treats that could be absorbed through the suit's intake system. The young one hummed with happiness, a sound like wind chimes in a breeze. Then the Kethrony cubs arrived. Vorak was attending meetings, so the cubs came with Danny. They walked through the cafeteria like they owned it, their small aprons still on from the morning kitchen duties. Ven led the way, his tail held high, his ears rotating to catch every sound. The other children stared. Some of them shrank back. A young Glorvian hid behind their parent's leg. Ven noticed the fear. His ears drooped slightly. He slowed his walk, making himself smaller. Marcus stepped forward. "Everyone, these are Ricketh, Sora, and Ven. They help me in the kitchen. They are very good at their jobs." He looked at the Glorvian children, who had stopped working on their puzzles. "Ven, why don't you show them how the puzzle boxes work? You solved one yesterday, remember?" Ven perked up. He padded over to the table where the Glorvians sat and pointed at one of the unsolved boxes with a small claw. His voice was quiet, almost shy. "This one," he said. "Press here first, then here, then turn." The Glorvian child looked at the predator cub, then at the box, then at their parent. The ambassador nodded encouragingly. Slowly, the Glorvian child followed Ven's instructions. "Press here, press there, turn." The box clicked open. Ven's tail wagged. The Glorvian child made a sound of delight. For a moment, predator and prey species child looked at each other with something like understanding. "Good job," Ven said. It was clearly a phrase he had learned from Marcus. The tension in the room shifted. Other children began to approach the Cafeteria cubs. Questions were asked, some in words, some in gestures. Sora demonstrated her plating techniques using treats and small plates. Ricketh offered opinions on which puzzle boxes were the most challenging. By lunchtime, the children's section was full of young beings from 6 different species, all playing together. Predators and prey, fast and slow, oxygen breathers, and methane absorbers. The parents sat at nearby tables, watching with expressions that ranged from surprised to amazed. Linda Vance arrived during the afternoon rush. She stood at the edge of the children's section, taking in the scene. A young Kathrani was showing a Colonian larva how to solve a puzzle, moving slowly and patiently to match the larva's pace. 2 Glorvian children were racing protein spheres across the floor with Sora, all of them giggling in their different ways. Ven was conducting a quality inspection with a group of young followers, teaching them how to sniff for freshness. I did not believe it when Vorak told me, Linda said quietly to Marcus. I thought he was exaggerating. The Kathrani do not exaggerate, Marcus replied. You know that. I know. Linda shook her head slowly. But this is something else. Do you understand what you have created here? Marcus shrugged. He was arranging supplies at the children's counter, making sure everything was stocked for the evening crowd. A menu for young ones, a space where they can play. No, Linda said. You have created a neutral ground. A place where children can meet each other without the baggage of their parents' politics, where they can form friendships that might last for decades. She pointed at the Glorvian child who was now sharing treats with Ven, both of them sitting side by side as if they had known each other for years. That child's parents were part of a faction that wanted nothing to do with predator species. They were afraid, suspicious, and now their child is best friends with a Cafeteria cub. Marcus looked at the 2 young ones. Ven was explaining something about his job as food inspector. The Glorvian child was listening with rapt attention. Neither of them seemed to notice or care about the differences between them. Children do not care about politics, Marcus said. They care about playing, about being included, about having fun. Exactly, Linda said. And their parents are watching. They are seeing their children happy, safe, accepted. They are seeing predator children who are gentle and helpful. They are reconsidering their assumptions. She turned to face Marcus fully. The negotiations with the Kathrani concluded yesterday. Full trade agreement, mutual defense provisions, cultural exchange programs. Vorak told me it was the smoothest negotiation he has ever been part of. I heard. Did you hear why? Linda asked. The other delegations changed their approach after seeing what happened here. They saw the cubs working in your kitchen. They saw children of different species playing together. They realized that coexistence was possible, that predators were not automatically threatening. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He watched Ricketh teaching a methane breather child how to identify good seasonings, both of them pointing at containers through the environmental suit's viewport. I did not plan any of this, he said finally. I just wanted to feed some hungry cubs. I know, Linda said. That is what makes it work. You did not have an agenda. You just saw children who needed help and you helped them. That authenticity, it matters. People can tell the difference. The evening brought more families. Word had spread further. Parents who had heard rumors about the program came to see for themselves. By dinner time, the children's section had to be expanded twice. Marcus worked continuously, adjusting portions, creating new variations, adapting to needs he had not anticipated. A family arrived with a child who could only consume food in liquid form. Marcus invented a new item on the spot. A thick, nutritious smoothie served in a container that revealed a hidden picture when emptied. Another family had a child with severe food allergies that affected half the standard ingredient list. Marcus spent 20 minutes discussing alternatives, then prepared a custom meal that was both safe and exciting. Grum complained constantly, as always, but his complaints had evolved again. Now he muttered about too much success, and impossible demand, and children everywhere underfoot. He also personally invented 3 new puzzle box designs and taught Sora a Tellarite technique for making edible flowers. The Tiki cleaning crew had grown accustomed to the cubs over the weeks. One of them, braver than the others, began working closer to Ven during his inspection rounds. The small cub had learned to control his hunting instincts around the insect beings. He would sometimes point out spots that needed extra cleaning, and the Tiki would chirp in acknowledgement. It was a small thing, but Marcus noticed everything in his kitchen. By the time the cafeteria closed for the night, Marcus was exhausted. His feet ached. His hands were sore. He had not sat down in 12 hours. But as he watched the last families leave, children waving goodbye to new friends from other species, he felt something that he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he was doing something that mattered. Danny approached with a data pad. Final count for today, 47 children served, representing 11 different species. No incidents, no injuries, no complaints. No complaints? Marcus raised an eyebrow. That seems statistically unlikely. Well, one Tellarite parent said the puzzle boxes were too easy, but Grum handled that. He made a harder version on the spot and challenged the parent to solve it. The parent could not. Marcus laughed. Of course he did. Danny hesitated, then asked, "Sir, what happens next?" The Cubs go home at the end of the week. Their father's assignment here is complete. Marcus had known this was coming. He had tried not to think about it. Then we continue without them, he said. The program is bigger than any 3 children. Other Cubs will come, other families. The work goes on. But you will miss them. It was not a question. Danny knew him well enough now to see the truth. Yes, Marcus admitted, I will miss them very much. He looked at the empty children's section, where chairs were pushed back and puzzle boxes waited to be reset. Tomorrow, Ricketh would be here to help with breakfast tasting. Sora would arrange the lunch plates. Ven would conduct his inspections, taking his job as seriously as any adult. 3 more days. Then they would leave. But the program would remain. The connections would last. The children who had played together would remember, even as they grew up and went their separate ways. That would have to be enough. 2 months after the Kethrani Cubs left Station Harmony, the galaxy teetered toward war. 3 species, the Vendari, the Hawks Collective, and the Silene, had reached a breaking point. Territorial disputes, ancient grudges, and recent provocations had combined into a crisis that threatened to engulf a dozen star systems. Station Harmony was chosen as the site for emergency negotiations. It was neutral ground, respected by all parties. The diplomats arrived with full delegations, armed escorts, and enough suspicion to fill a cargo bay. Linda Vance had not slept in 3 days. She moved between meeting rooms, trying to find any common ground between species that refused to be in the same room together. The Vendari delegation would not speak directly to the Hawks. The Hawks considered the Silene to be beneath notice. The Silene were convinced both other species were plotting against them. Nothing was working. Every approach failed. Every compromise was rejected. On the 4th day of the summit, Linda sat in her office and stared at the wall. She was out of ideas. The talks would collapse by tomorrow. After that, war was inevitable. Marcus found her there. He knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response. He carried 2 cups of coffee, real coffee from Earth, which he had been hoarding for a special occasion. "You look terrible," he said. "Thank you for your honesty." Linda accepted the coffee and took a long drink. "I assume you're here to tell me something. You do not usually leave your kitchen during dinner rush." "Grum can handle it." Marcus sat in the chair across from her desk. "I have an idea. You will not like it." "I do not like anything right now. Tell me anyway." Marcus explained his plan. Linda listened. Her expression shifted from skeptical to alarmed to thoughtful. By the end, she was staring at him like he had grown a second head. "That is insane," she said. "Probably. It could make everything worse. It could. The diplomats will be furious. Almost certainly." Linda was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the reports on her desk, the failed proposals, the rejected compromises. She looked at the star map on her wall, showing the disputed territories, the fleet positions, the potential battle zones. Then she looked at Marcus. "When can you be ready?" The next day, the diplomatic delegations were informed that the evening session would be held in the cafeteria. The Vendari ambassador protested. A cafeteria was beneath the dignity of formal negotiations. The Hawks representative demanded to know the reason for this irregular venue. The Silene delegation threatened to withdraw entirely. Linda held firm. The venue change is non-negotiable. You may attend, or you may leave. The choice is yours. They all attended. No one wanted to be the first to abandon the summit, but none of them expected what happened when they arrived. The cafeteria had been transformed. The main dining area was set with formal tables, appropriate for diplomatic proceedings, but attached to the main space, visible through large windows, was an expanded children's section. And in that section were the children, not just any children, the children of the delegations themselves. The Vendari had brought their offspring to the station, as was their custom during extended negotiations. The Hawks Collective considered family units essential for decision-making. The Silene traveled with their young because leaving them behind was culturally unthinkable. All of them had children on the station. And all of those children had been quietly invited to the cafeteria for what was described as a special welcome program. The Vendari adults froze when they saw their young ones through the window. The children were already seated at small tables, examining puzzle boxes and colorful plates. Staff members, including Danny, who had specifically requested this assignment, moved among them, explaining the activities. "What is the meaning of this?" the Vendari ambassador demanded. "Your children need to eat," Marcus said calmly. He stood at the entrance to the children's section, wearing his white chef coat, looking completely unintimidated by the angry diplomats. "We have prepared meals appropriate for each species. While they eat and play, you may conduct your negotiations in the main area." "This is manipulation," the Hawks representative hissed. "This is dinner," Marcus replied. "The children are hungry. They have been confined to quarters for days while their parents argued. They deserve some enjoyment." Before any adult could respond, a small Vendari child spotted her father through the window and waved enthusiastically. Her father, a senior diplomat with decades of experience, automatically waved back. The gesture was instinctive, unstoppable. The tension in the room shifted slightly. The children began their activities. The puzzle boxes were popular, as always. The rolling protein treats were a hit with the younger Hawks, who were predatory by nature. The Silene young discovered the color-changing drinks and immediately began competing to see who could wait the longest for the best colors. Then something happened that Marcus had hoped for but had not dared to expect. A young Vendari approached a Hawk's child. Both were struggling with the same puzzle box design. Neither could solve it alone. Danny, watching carefully, gently suggested they work together. Hesitantly, the two children began to cooperate. The Vendari had clever fingers. The Hawks had better spatial reasoning. Together, they managed what neither could do separately. The box clicked open, and both children cheered. Their parents, watching through the window, saw everything. The dinner proceeded. The adults conducted their negotiations in the main area, but their attention kept drifting to the children's section. They watched Vendari and Hawks and Silene young ones playing together. They watched ancient enemies sharing treats and solving puzzles side by side. They watched their children laughing. Slowly, grudgingly, the atmosphere in the main room began to change. The accusations became less bitter. The demands became less extreme. Small concessions were offered, then accepted. By the end of the evening, the delegations had agreed to continue talking the next day. It was not peace. It was not even close to peace, but it was progress. Linda found Marcus in the kitchen after the event. He was cleaning counters, his movements slow and tired. "That was a risk," she said. "Yes, it could have backfired. If any child had been hurt, if any incident had occurred, but it did not." Marcus set down his cleaning cloth. "Children are children, Ambassador. They do not carry their parents' grudges. They do not remember ancient wars. They just want to play. And their parents? Their parents want their children to be happy and safe." Marcus smiled slightly. "Watching your child make friends with the enemy's child, it changes something. It is hard to hate someone whose offspring your offspring loves." The negotiations continued for 2 more weeks. The tiny Menace menu became a daily feature. Children from all three species gathered each evening, playing and eating together, forming friendships that their parents had never imagined possible. The adults watched. They talked. They argued less. On the final day, a ceasefire was signed. Not a full peace treaty. That would take months more of negotiation, but a commitment to stop the immediate slide toward war. A promise to keep talking. The official documentation credited Ambassador Vance's tireless diplomatic efforts. It mentioned the neutral venue, the careful mediation, the creative problem-solving. It did not mention the cafeteria, but everyone who had been there knew the truth. That evening, after the delegations had departed and the station was returning to normal, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen. The cubs had been gone for weeks. The crisis children had left with their parents. The children's section was quiet and empty. His communication device buzzed. It was a message from Vorak. The Cafeteria diplomat had followed the summit from his homeworld. He had heard about the cafeteria approach from contacts on the station. The message was simple. "You have done well, Kethral. My cubs ask about you every day. They are teaching their friends how to solve puzzle boxes. Ven has declared himself chief inspector of our family kitchen. Sora decorates every meal. Ricketh is learning to cook." There was an attachment, a video of 3 Kathrani cubs in a kitchen, wearing small aprons, working together to prepare a meal. Ven was sniffing containers. Sora was arranging plates. Ricketh was carefully stirring a pot. Marcus watched the video 3 times. Then he saved it to his personal archive. The door opened behind him. Grum entered, carrying a datapad. "The station commander wants to expand the program," the Tellarite announced. "Formally. Permanent funding. Staff allocation, the whole thing." "What did you tell her?" "I told her it was a terrible idea and would cause endless problems." Grum paused. "Then I gave her a list of recommended improvements and a budget proposal." Marcus laughed. It was a good laugh, full and warm. "Thank you, Grum. Do not thank me. This means more work, more chaos, more children underfoot at all hours." Grum's flat nose twitched. "But perhaps it is the good kind of chaos." He turned and left the kitchen. Marcus sat alone for a moment longer. He thought about the cubs who had invaded his kitchen, the diplomats who had eaten his food, the children who had played and laughed and become friends across species lines. He thought about the power of a simple meal to bring beings together, the way sharing food could build bridges that politics could not. He thought about Ven, the smallest cub, asking, "Not pray?" with those big amber eyes. About Sora's pride when her plating was praised. About Ricketh's solemn dignity, so adult in such a young body. He thought about a Glorvian child and a Kethrani cub sitting side by side, sharing treats, not knowing or caring that their species had feared each other for generations. That was the real victory, not treaties or ceasefires or diplomatic agreements. Those were important, but they were fragile. They could be broken by the next crisis, the next dispute, the next misunderstanding. But children who grew up knowing that the enemy was just another kid who liked puzzles and treats? Children who had made friends across species lines before they were old enough to learn hate? Those children would grow up different. They would become adults who remembered playing together, sharing together, laughing together. They would be harder to manipulate into war. It was a small thing, really. 1 cafeteria on 1 station, a few puzzle boxes and rolling treats, some tiny aprons and patient instruction. But small things grew. Marcus stood and looked around his kitchen one more time. Tomorrow, there would be work to do. New menus to plan. New species to accommodate. New children to welcome. The tiny menace. Menu was just the beginning. He turned off the lights and left the kitchen. Behind him, the empty chairs and quiet tables waited for tomorrow, when they would fill once again with the sound of children playing and the smell of good food and the slow, patient work of building a better galaxy, one meal at a time.